The first sign of war came not from the stars but from silence. Human colonies stopped answering their signals, as if swallowed by the void. Traders who traveled beyond the rim never returned, leaving only broken beacons behind. When Earth sent the patrols vanished too, like dust carried by a storm. Nobody understood what hunted them, until the alien fleet arrived at the edge of human space. The fleet carried banners of the Uran Empire, a power so old that humans were little more than whispers in their council halls. Their warships stretched like blades of silver cutting through the dark sky. They did not speak of peace. They came with fire, demanding tribute and obedience. Yet their true purpose was stranger, for they sought something not found on any map. They searched for the Queen's daughter, hidden beyond their reach. Earth's defense was fast but broken. Cities burned on frontier worlds. Families fled into tunnels beneath shattered colonies. Soldiers fought with courage, yet courage was not enough against the Empire's endless armies. But the Uran did not destroy everything. Instead, they carved paths straight to one human world and stopped their fury. Their armies surrounded it like hunters circling prey. That was where the Queen appeared, stepping from a ship that glowed like dawn. She was tall, radiant, and armored in silver laced with blue. A crown rested on her hair, which shimmered like flowing light. Every soldier bent the knee, for she was not only a queen but a symbol of power older than human nations. At her side stood her daughter, younger, smaller, yet carrying the same crown of light. The girl's eyes burned with both fear and pride as she watched the humans. Her presence was no accident. She was the reason the war began. The humans were dragged into the Queen's court, not as allies but as captives. Among them was a soldier named Marcus, a man whose home had been lost in the first strike of the Empire. He stood with wrists bound but eyes steady, unwilling to bow before the Queen. The court whispered at his defiance, for no other prisoner dared lift their head before her. When his gaze met hers, silence fell across the hall like the closing of a door. The Queen rose and her voice carried like a blade drawn from a sheath. "Why do you not fear me, human?" she asked. "Why do you not care for my daughter, though she is the brightest jewel of this empire?" Her words cut deeper than the chains on his wrists. The crowd waited for his answer, expecting him to falter. Yet he did not tremble. His voice was steady, and his eyes never left hers. "She is too beautiful," Marcus said. "So beautiful that to care for her would be to worship her, and worship would not be honest. I do not care for her because her beauty blinds me, and I fear I would not see the truth behind it." His words echoed in the court, strange and heavy. No one expected such an answer, least of all the Queen herself. The daughter turned her eyes toward him. Her crown glimmered under the light, and for a moment her lips parted as if she wanted to speak. But she said nothing. The silence grew louder than any war drum. The Queen studied Marcus with an expression that no soldier could read. What began as a war of fire had suddenly become something else, a question of hearts and hidden truths. The court remained frozen after Marcus spoke. His words hung in the air like smoke, twisting through the minds of everyone who had heard them. No human had ever dared to speak so plainly before the alien Queen, and no one had ever spoken of her daughter in such a way. The soldiers waited for punishment, but none came. The Queen did not lift her hand, and her daughter did not lower her eyes. Marcus felt the weight of their stares, but did not bend. He had lost his home and his people, and the fire inside him burned brighter than fear. Around him, other captives whispered prayers, certain his life would be ended in that moment. Yet the Queen did not strike. Instead, she stepped closer, her silver armor shining under the light of her hall. She looked at him as if searching for something buried deep in his words. "You speak of beauty as though it is a curse," she said. Her voice was calm but sharp enough to cut steel. "Do you think my daughter is cursed because of what she is The girl at her side shifted slightly, her small hands tightening against her gown. Her crown tilted as she turned her face toward Marcus. There was a question in her eyes that matched her mother's, a silent plea for his truth. Marcus raised his chin. "No curse lies in her beauty," he answered. "But beauty alone cannot be trusted. Too many have died chasing beauty instead of truth. I will not be one of them." His chains rattled as he spoke, yet his voice did not falter. His words spread through the chamber, echoing against stone and armor. The guards gripped their spears tighter, ready to strike if the queen commanded. But again, she remained still. The queen studied him with a gaze that seemed endless. The hall waited for her judgment, each second heavier than the last. Then she turned, not to Marcus but to her daughter. "What do you see in this human?" she asked. Her voice echoed softly through the chamber, and every soldier shifted as the question passed to the young girl. Her lips parted, and her voice trembled at first, though her words carried clear. "He does not fear us," she said. "He does not fall when others kneel. He speaks as if my crown does not matter, as if I am no different from him. I have never seen that before." Her voice was soft, but each word landed like a stone on still water. The queen's eyes narrowed, though her expression did not reveal anger. Instead, it showed something deeper, something only she understood. Murmurs swept the court. Soldiers and nobles alike exchanged glances, struggling to comprehend what they had just witnessed. A human had spoken truth to their queen. A daughter of the empire had acknowledged him without disdain. The balance of power in that hall shifted in ways none could name. The queen lifted her hand, silencing all voices. Her command was sharp and final. "Release him," she said. Her order struck like thunder. The guards hesitated, unable to believe, but a single glare from her forced them forward. The chains that bound Marcus were unlocked and fell clattering to the ground. He stood free, though surrounded by enemies. Every eye in the chamber followed him, filled with suspicion, anger, and fear. Yet he remained steady, his gaze still fixed on the queen and her daughter. Marcus rubbed his wrists where the chains had cut his skin. "Why free me?" he asked. His voice was not defiant now, but curious, edged with caution. He expected a trap. Another layer of this strange game. The queen stepped forward, her crown catching the light, her eyes locked to his. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of destiny. "Because," she said, "a man who does not bow to beauty may yet stand for truth, and I have need of truth." Her daughter's gaze lingered on Marcus, her lips pressing together as though to speak again. Yet she stayed silent, watching him with eyes that seemed too deep for her age. The court watched in silence, for the game of war had just changed into something they could not yet name. The guards stepped back after unlocking Marcus, but their eyes stayed locked on him. To them, he was no longer just a prisoner. He was now something far more dangerous. A man who had caught the queen's attention was no ordinary captive. He stood taller, his shoulders squared, as though freedom itself had given him new strength. The court whispered his name like a secret that should not be spoken. The queen turned, her crown gleaming under the hall's light. "You will walk among us, human," she declared. "But do not mistake freedom for trust. Every step you take will be watched." Her words carried both warning and curiosity. Her daughter stood beside her silently, though her gaze never left. Marcus. She studied him the way one studies a flame, unsure if it will warm or burn. Marcus bowed his head slightly, not in obedience but in respect for the weight of her words. "I will walk," he said, "but I will walk by my own strength." His voice reached every corner of the hall, and though simple, it carried defiance that unsettled the soldiers. They were bred to bow to crowns, yet this man spoke as if no crown could hold him. It was a truth none of them wished to face. The queen dismissed the court, and one by one, the nobles left the chamber. Their robes whispered against the stone floor, their murmurs heavy with suspicion. Only the queen, her daughter Marcus, and a handful of guards remained. The great doors closed with a thunderous sound, shutting out the noise of the world beyond. In the sudden silence, the queen studied him again, her expression unreadable. "You have no fear of death," she said. "Why?" Her question cut deep. For even her greatest generals feared her judgment. Marcus lifted his head, his jaw set. "Because death already claimed my world," he answered. "What I fear is forgetting why we lived." His words struck the air like a blade against stone. Even the guards glanced at each other, unsettled by his conviction. The queen's daughter stepped forward then, her young voice clear. "And what? Do you see when you look at me?" she asked. The chamber seemed to still with her question. It was not her mother's command but her own curiosity that guided her. Marcus turned his eyes to her, and the weight of his gaze was enough to silence every guard in the room. "I see a girl who was born with more than any human could dream," Marcus said. "But I also see chains of gold instead of iron. You are caged by the power that others worship. I cannot care for you because you are not free. Until you are free, beauty will remain a mask and not the truth." His words were steady, yet they carried a fire that made the girl's eyes widen. The queen's lips pressed together, as if holding back an emotion none could read. Her daughter's hands trembled slightly, though she quickly hid them behind her gown. The guards shifted uneasily, waiting for the queen's wrath. Yet she did not raise her voice. Instead, she stepped closer, her presence towering over Marcus like a storm. "You see chains where others see glory," she said. "That is dangerous. And perhaps that is why I need you." Her words cut deeper than a sword. The daughter looked between her mother and Marcus, her expression torn. She had never heard anyone speak to her with such honesty. No flattery, no fear, only truth. It both unsettled and fascinated her. For the first time, she wondered what life outside crowns and palaces would mean. Her lips parted again, but the queen raised a hand, silencing her before she could speak. "You will serve me," the queen declared. "Not as a slave, nor as a prisoner, but as one who will show me truth. Refuse, and you will die. Accept, and you may yet live." Marcus held her gaze without flinching. He knew the choice before him was no choice at all. Still, his words were clear, and his voice did not shake as he spoke his answer. "I accept," he said. His voice rang against the chamber walls like iron striking iron. The queen nodded slowly, her eyes gleaming with something neither the guards nor her daughter could name. In that moment, the war that had begun with fire now turned into something stranger, shaped not by armies, but by a single human and the dangerous truth he carried. From that day forward, Marcus walked within the queen's palace, not as a prisoner, but as something more complicated. Guards followed his every step, their eyes sharp, their hands close to their weapons. Servants bowed when he passed, though their whispers carried suspicion. He was a stranger in a place that never trusted strangers, yet he walked with his head held high. The queen had given him a place no other human had ever been offered. The daughter watched him most closely. Whenever he entered the great hall, her gaze found him. When he spoke to the soldiers, her ears followed his words. At night, when the torches burned low, she walked the balconies and saw him moving among the training yards. He never bowed to anyone, not even when generals barked at him. To her, this was both frightening and strange, for no one defied crowns so openly. One evening, the queen summoned him to her private chamber. It was not filled with gold, but with maps, scrolls, and ancient relics of battles long forgotten. She sat at a tall desk, her armor gleaming even without sunlight. She looked up as he entered and studied him with eyes that did not blink quickly. Her voice was calm but heavy, carrying the weight of centuries. "You speak of truth. Show me truth in this," she said as she pointed to the maps. The maps revealed human colonies burning at the edges of the empire. Red marks traced the losses, black lines showed advancing fleets. Marcus felt his chest tighten as he saw worlds he once knew turned into ashes on parchment. His jaw clenched as he studied them, but he did not lower his eyes. "The truth," he said slowly, "is that you are winning, but you are not at peace. You conquer, yet your people whisper fear behind your back." His words left the chamber colder. The queen's eyes narrowed, but she did not strike. Instead, she leaned forward. "And what would you do, human? How would you shape an empire that has ruled for 1,000 years? Marcus met her gaze without hesitation. "I would stop fighting for fear and start fighting for trust. Soldiers will die for fear, but they will live for loyalty. You rule by chains, but chains break. Loyalty lasts." His voice shook the quiet chamber like thunder. The queen leaned back, her fingers tapping against the desk. Her expression revealed little, but something shifted in her eyes. "You dare to teach me how to rule," she said softly. "Do you believe yourself wiser than a queen?" Marcus did not flinch. "No," he answered, "but I believe myself honest." The silence stretched, broken only by the soft crackle of torches. Then, for the first time, the queen smiled, though it was a smile of danger. The daughter entered quietly, her small crown glimmering under the torchlight. She looked from her mother to Marcus, and then to the maps spread across the desk. "Mother," she said gently, "if his words are true, then he is not an enemy, he is a mirror. Even the strongest must face their reflection." Her words were soft but sharp, carrying wisdom far older than her years. The queen regarded her daughter in silence, her face unreadable. Later that night, Marcus walked the palace gardens under the stars. The air was cool, filled with the scent of alien flowers that glowed faintly in the dark. He paused at a fountain where the daughter waited. She stood alone, her hands folded before her. "Why did you speak such words to her?" she asked. "Most would beg for mercy. You speak as though her crown means nothing." Her voice carried a tremor, but also a hunger for understanding. Marcus looked at her, the torchlight dancing across her features. "Because crowns are heavy," he said, "and those who wear them need truth more than anyone. If I spoke lies, she would see me as nothing but another servant. But if I speak truth, even when it cuts, then she will remember me." The girl studied him closely, her young face shadowed by thoughts too deep for her age. "You think she will trust you?" she asked. Marcus shook his head. "No, but she will test me. And perhaps in those tests, I will find if she deserves trust herself." His voice was quiet, but firm. The girl's eyes lowered, and she turned back toward the glowing flowers. The night stretched silent around them, but the path ahead had already changed. The queen's game was only beginning, and Marcus had already taken his first step into it. The next days in the palace tested Marcus more than chains ever had. He was given no cell, yet freedom was only a word. Guards shadowed him in every corridor. Nobles glared at him as though he carried disease. Soldiers muttered threats under their breath, longing for the order to cut him down. Yet he walked as though none of it touched him. Each step was steady, each glance calm, and that made them fear him more. The queen observed from afar, though she spoke little. She sent him scrolls of law, histories of her empire, and reports of distant battles. He read them with care, storing each word like a blade for future use. What struck him most was not the victories of the Uran Empire, but the cracks hidden within. For every conquest, there was rebellion. For every crown, there was blood beneath it. The empire looked unshakable, yet it trembled in silence. The daughter found reasons to linger near him. In the gardens and the halls, even in the library where ancient texts lay untouched, she came with quiet steps. She asked questions with curiosity sharp as a blade. "Why do humans fight wars they cannot win? Why do you speak to my mother without fear? Why do you not see me as others do?" Marcus answered her with the same honesty he gave her mother. though his words were softer when they reached her ears. Humans fight wars they cannot win because freedom matters more than life, he told her. I speak to your mother without fear because fear builds cages, and I broke mine long ago. And I do not see you as others do because I see the weight you carry, not only the crown you wear. The girl listened in silence, her eyes wide, her heart caught between loyalty and awakening. His words pressed against truths she had never dared to think. Whispers spread through the palace like fire through dry grass. Some said the human had bewitched the queen's daughter. Others claimed he plotted to overthrow the throne. Still others whispered that the queen herself was testing loyalty by keeping him near. None of them dared to say such things too loudly, for the queen's wrath was still feared. Yet fear alone could not silence every tongue. The palace swirled with unrest, and Marcus stood at its center. One night, the queen summoned him again. The chamber was darker than before, lit only by a single fire. She did not sit at her desk this time but stood, her armor set aside. She wore robes that marked not only power but mourning. Marcus entered quietly, his eyes meeting hers without hesitation. Her first words were not a command but a question. Do you know why I began this war? She asked, her voice low. Marcus shook his head. To claim power? He guessed. The queen's lips curved slightly, but not in amusement. No, she said. Power I already had. I began this war because they hid her from me. She lifted her hand toward the door, and the daughter stepped into the chamber. The girl's eyes widened at her mother's confession, as if hearing it for the first time. The queen's gaze softened, though her tone remained sharp. They sought to use her against me, to twist her fate. I burned worlds to keep her safe. Marcus felt the weight of her words crash against him. The war that had killed millions, the flames that had consumed his world, all tied to one truth. A mother's love sharpened into war, her daughter's safety built on ash. He stared at the queen, his hands curling into fists. His voice was calm but heavy when he spoke. Then you did not fight to conquer, you fought to protect. And yet, you destroyed what you swore to shield. The queen's eyes flashed, yet she did not strike. She stepped closer, her breath steady, her presence heavy as stone. Would you not do the same? She asked. If your blood was threatened, would you not set fire to the stars themselves to save them? Marcus stood silent for a long moment. He saw his family in her question, saw their faces lost to fire, saw the graves burned into his memory. His answer came not in rage but in truth. Yes, he said, I would. But I would not forget the dead I left behind. The daughter moved forward, her voice trembling yet clear. Then both of you are bound by the same truth, she said. You would burn for those you love. But who will burn for those who have no one? Her words struck both mother and human alike. The fire crackled between them, the chamber heavy with silence. In that moment, Marcus realized that war was no longer about crowns or chains. It was about the girl who stood between them, carrying the weight of two worlds in her voice. Asterisk, the daughter's words lingered in the chamber long after they were spoken. Her voice was soft, but it cut sharper than any blade. Both Marcus and the queen looked at her, and for a moment neither spoke. The fire snapped in the silence, throwing shadows across their faces. It was as though the girl had spoken a truth. They both feared but could not deny. The queen stepped back slowly. Her crown glimmered in the low light, but her eyes were no longer as steady. She had fought wars, ended dynasties, and broken empires without hesitation, yet her daughter's voice pierced deeper than armies. You speak as though you carry wisdom far beyond your years, she said at last. Her tone carried neither anger nor pride, but something heavier, like sorrow. The girl lowered her gaze but did not retreat. Marcus turned toward the queen. She is right, he said firmly. We both fight for those we love, but who fights? For the ones forgotten? Who stands for those who have no crowns, no armies, no names in history? His voice grew stronger with each word. The guards outside shifted restlessly, hearing his words through the great doors. The queen's expression hardened, yet she did not silence him. "You believe yourself that champion?" the queen asked. Her question rang like steel on steel. Marcus did not look away. "I believe I must try," he replied. "If war burns only for the strong, then the weak are already lost. Someone must stand, and if it is me, then so be it." His voice struck the chamber like thunder, and even the queen's daughter shivered at the force within it. The queen studied him for a long moment. Her silence was heavier than any threat. Finally, she drew in a slow breath. "You speak boldly," she said, "but words are air. Show me truth with action. If you wish to stand for those who have no one, then you will lead where my armies cannot." Her gaze was sharp as a blade, her command heavy as iron. Marcus nodded, his jaw set with resolve. The task came swiftly. Beyond the palace walls, villages had fallen into chaos. With war tearing the stars apart, soldiers abandoned their posts. Bandettes rose in the ruins, and innocents cried for help. The queen gave Marcus a unit of guards, not as allies but as watchers. He would march with them into the broken villages. If he failed, he would die. If he succeeded, she would see if his truth carried weight. The march was long and tense. The guards whispered among themselves, mocking him, certain that a human could not lead. Yet Marcus walked at their head, never faltering. When they reached the first village, the sight struck them silent. Homes burned to ashes, streets filled with fear, and families huddled together with nothing left. Bandits prowled like wolves, preying on the weak. Marcus stepped forward without hesitation. He fought not with arrogance, but with fury. His chains were gone, but the fire of loss remained in him. Every strike of his blade carried the memory of his people. Every shout carried the weight of his promise. The guards followed at first reluctantly, then fiercely, as though his fire had spread into them. By the end of the day, the village stood free. The bandits lay defeated, and the people looked upon Marcus with eyes of hope. That night, under a sky filled with stars, a daughter came quietly to him. She had left the palace to see with her own eyes what truth looked like in battle. She saw him kneel beside the wounded, saw him give his own water to crying children, saw him stand guard while others slept. "Now I understand," she whispered. "You do not fight for crowns or chains, you fight for lives." Her voice trembled with awe. Marcus looked at her, his face lined with weariness but steady with resolve. "This is truth," he said. "Not banners, not thrones. Only people. They are the reason to fight. Without them, beauty means nothing, power means nothing." His words carried through the night air, simple but unshakable. And as the queen's daughter listened, she realized her world would never look the same again. When dawn rose over the village, the people gathered around Marcus as if he were a shield come to life. They offered him food, though they had little, and whispered thanks as though he carried light into their darkness. The guards who had doubted him now looked upon him with uneasy respect. They had seen him fight with more than skill. He had fought with heart, and that unsettled them more than any blade. The daughter remained at his side, her gown marked with the dust of travel. She had walked among the villagers, spoken to children, and held the hands of the wounded. For the first time in her life, she felt what it meant to be seen, not as a crown, but as a person. Their eyes had not worshipped her beauty. They had looked at her with trust, the same trust they gave Marcus. It left her heart heavy and alive all at once. When they returned to the palace, the queen waited in her great hall. She listened to the reports in silence, her gaze fixed on Marcus. The guards bowed low, speaking of his courage, though their voices carried both pride and unease. The daughter stepped forward and spoke of what she had seen. Her words were not polished like the nobles, but raw and clear. "He gave them more than victory," she said. "He gave them hope." The queen's eyes darkened at her daughter's words. Hope was more dangerous than any weapon, for hope could not be chained. She studied Marcus as though weighing the cost of letting him breathe. "You have done what my generals could not," she said slowly. "But do not mistake this for triumph. You walk a knife's edge, human, and a single step will cut you." Her voice was iron, yet beneath it ran something she tried to hide. Marcus stood steady. "Then I will keep walking," he answered. His words carried no pride, only certainty. The court stirred uneasily, whispering at his defiance, but none dared challenge him openly. The daughter's gaze lingered on him, her eyes shining with something more than admiration. The queen noticed, though she said nothing. Her silence was heavier than any storm. That night, the palace did not rest. Whispers ran through the corridors like cold wind. Nobles plotted in shadows, speaking of poison and betrayal. Generals sharpened their blades, swearing no human would stand above them. Servants prayed in silence, for they felt change in the air. And within her chamber, the queen sat alone, her hand resting upon her crown. She knew her empire trembled, and at the center of its shaking stood a man without chains. Marcus did not sleep either. He stood on the balcony, staring into the dark horizon. His thoughts were heavy with the faces of the villagers, with the cries of the children he had promised to protect. He knew he was only one man, yet he also knew that truth burned brighter than numbers. He had seen it in the eyes of soldiers who followed him, in the hope of strangers who once feared him. That fire could not be put out with fear. The daughter joined him quietly. She stood beside him without speaking for a long time. Then her voice came soft, trembling with a weight she had never spoken before. "When you said I was not free, you were right. All my life I have been bound by what others see, not by what I am. But when I stood in that village, I felt free for the first time." Her words broke in the air like fragile glass. Marcus turned his head toward her. "Then you know why I cannot care for you as others do," he said. "You must first learn to walk without chains, even golden ones. Only then will anyone see the truth of who you are." His voice was steady, though his heart ached with the weight of his own words. The daughter looked down, her hands clutching her gown, torn between duty and the pull of something greater. Behind them, unseen, the queen stood in the shadows of the hall. She had come quietly, her steps hidden, her crown dim in the torchlight. She listened to her daughter's words and the human's reply. Her eyes burned with fire, not of anger but of fear. For the first time in her reign, she wondered if truth itself was more dangerous than war. And she knew that soon, a choice would fall upon her that no crown could protect her from. Asterisk. The palace grew restless in the days that followed. Nobles pressed their queen for answers, generals demanded blood, and whispers of rebellion spread like cracks in glass. All of them blamed the human who now walked among them freely. They claimed his presence weakened the empire, that his words poisoned both queen and daughter. Yet when the queen raised her hand, silence always followed. None dared strike against him while her eyes still watched. The daughter stood at Marcus's side more often now. She no longer feared the judgment of her people. She spoke with him in the gardens, walked beside him in the training grounds, and sat near him in the library where ancient texts gathered dust. Her crown still glimmered, but her gaze had changed. No longer did she carry herself as only a princess of the empire. Now she carried herself as someone seeking the truth he had given her. One night, the queen summoned them both into her private chamber. The air was heavy, the torches low, and silence pressed like stone against the walls. She looked at her daughter first, then at Marcus. "You have both seen what my empire hides," she said. "You have seen the cracks in the throne, the weight of chains even in golden halls. But know this. Truth has a price, and power will not let it pass freely." Her words fell like iron. Marcus answered her without fear. Truth always has a price. But lies cost more in the end. His voice carried steady through the chamber. The daughter's eyes turned to him, her chest rising with quiet courage. For the first time, She spoke not as a child, not even as a princess, but as something greater. "Then let us pay the price together," she said. Her voice carried like a spark into dry wood. The queen's face tightened. For a moment, her crown seemed heavier than the stars above. "If you choose truth," she said slowly, "you will walk against everything this empire was built upon. You will bring anger, rebellion, and war to my gates. And when it comes, it will not only seek me, it will fall upon you as well." Her words struck with the weight of prophecy. The daughter did not turn away, and Marcus did not bow. When the storm finally came, it rose not from distant stars, but from within the palace itself. Nobles gathered soldiers loyal to their own banners. Generals plotted in secret chambers, their blades thirsting for the queen's fall. They came with fire and steel, swearing that no human would lead them into weakness. The night shook with the clash of armies inside the very heart of the empire. And at the center of it stood Marcus, the queen, and her daughter. Marcus fought with the fire of every loss he had carried. His blade sang through the halls, his voice rose to rally those who still believed in loyalty over fear. The queen herself fought beside him, her crown gleaming under firelight, her skill unmatched as she struck down traitors. At her side, her daughter stood unyielding, no longer hidden behind robes of silk. She carried no weapon but her voice. And her voice carried more than steel. "To follow lies is to walk into ruin," she cried. "To follow truth is to live." Her words cut through the roar of battle. Soldiers faltered, some lowering their blades, others turning against their masters. Hope, once buried, rose like a tide that no chain could hold back. In that moment, the empire trembled not because of war, but because of a single human, and the princess who dared to believe. When dawn broke, the halls were scarred with fire and blood. Yet the throne still stood, and upon it the queen remained. She had fought not only her enemies, but her own fear. Her gaze turned to Marcus, and for the first time her voice carried neither command nor warning. "You were right," she said. "Chains break, but truth endures." Her words were quiet, but they carried through the ruined hall like a new law. The daughter stepped forward, her crown glimmering in the morning light. She stood beside Marcus, no longer only a jewel of the empire, but a voice of her own. Together, they faced the queen, not as enemies, not as servants, but as allies. The queen's eyes softened, and she gave the smallest of nods. For the first time in her long reign, she saw not just her daughter's beauty, but her strength. And beside her, she saw the human who had given both of them truth.